on this computer. Nice. Okay, cool. So we're talking about federalism this week, and it's super important. Hold on, this. I'm so sorry. Federalism is the division of power between a state and state and national government. It could also be split between like a state government and local governments. So it was implemented in the United States Constitution as a method to protect individual rights and liberties. If you remember from your federal class, it was pretty contentious, the ratification process of the Constitution. There were the Federalists who were strongly in favor of ratifying the Constitution, and then there were the Anti-Federalists who didn't think that the Constitution, as it was written originally, went far enough into protecting the civil rights and liberties for citizens. So they advocated strongly for inclusion of the Bill of Rights. But if you look at, oh goodness, I'm home, so now I actually have access to my books. Heck yeah. One of these books down here has the Federalists. I don't feel good and I don't want to go look for it, but it talks about some of the structures that have been embedded into the United States Constitution. Sophie, come here. Come here. She looks like she's about to attack something, and I don't know what it is, but I'm excited. She's crazy. We have a system of checks and balances. Jesus, this is why I hate doing Zoom from home. I get so distracted. Checks and balances and separation of powers, and those are embedded in the Constitution. This use of federalism is in addition to those other structures put in the Constitution. So federalism, here, let me just, actually, I'm gonna talk about it. Federalism is through Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 through 17 of the United States Constitution are called the expressed powers of government or the enumerated powers of government. Write that down. I'll put it in the chat. One through 17. These are the expressed government. Those are the 17 things that the Constitution gives unique responsibility or power to the federal government, which means that states can't infringe on those things. Things like creating post offices, declaring war, coining money. Those are things that belong only to the federal government. Does anybody know what Article 1?
I don't want to turn it on.
You have to turn it on?
If I had my grab bag of toys and stickers, I would offer those. Hold on, let me find a quick Constitution in my. Man, I have so many books. Just a second. Let me also tell you guys one fun fact about what happened to me 2 days ago. I broke my toe. And I dropped a chair on it, and now I have like a huge gash, and it hurts. So I can never find what I need. All these stickers. And none of them tell me where it is. Found it. All right. So Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution looks like you guys can't, that doesn't do that at all. Hold on. Why not? Doesn't matter, that was unnecessary. It says Congress shall have the power to lay, collect taxes, borrow money, regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states. That's important. That's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. To regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. That's significant. Yeah, Dean, it for sure was an ouch. It's called the Interstate Commerce Clause. Interstate Commerce Clause is one of the ways or one of the most contentious clauses in the Constitution because it is very ambiguous, and with the growth of our nation and the globalization of our world economies, there's a lot of things that are going between different states, right? So, excuse me, if you have a product that's made in one state and then shipped across to another state, which is the state that determines the price and regulations of those goods could vary pretty significantly. And so that would have to be exclusively given to the federal government. The other Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 is super important. This clause is called the necessary and proper clause. And it says that Congress shall have the power to create laws as they feel are necessary and proper for carrying into the execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution and the government. That means that while the express powers of government give exclusive, excuse me, exclusive control to the federal government over certain areas, that does not or shouldn't be construed to be the only areas of government. Look, now I'm in Parks and Rec. I have way too much fun with this stuff. Do you guys, does this look real? Does this look like my real background? Like, could I pass off as being super smart? No, okay. What about this one? It's because of this outline, right? Like if I had a better camera.
I think that's just Zoom. It's not really about the camera, you know? It's just how like the outline of Zoom is.
While you guys catch up on notes, I'm gonna do this. I want this one. I've been to Graceland, y'all know. I have a picture of myself standing right here. No. Aw, my son. You guys hear that? It's my kitten. All right, it's not working and I've lost interest. So we're just gonna stick with John. No, we're gonna go with this one. Okay, so the necessary and proper clause allows government to expand their powers underneath the express powers pretty significantly. Oh, look, everybody. So let me move this over. Federalism is, like I said before, the division of powers between the national and state governments. And it is contentious in that as we grow as a nation, there are new developments and new like processes that come through government. A lot of the things government hadn't, or you really can't know that it's going to be an issue. And deciding who is in charge of that issue until it happens. An example of this is COVID and the response to the COVID pandemic. We had a lot of very immediate needs to have localized government and a localized response, while at the same time, it was catastrophic among all 50 states. And so that seems like it would be an area for the federal government, right? Because also it affected our trade with other nations and among the states. Thank you, Jacob. She is a cute cat. She's weird, but she's cute. I have another one, but he's outside. Hold on, I just got a text about my son. Oh, sick. Poor boy. So what you might have seen happening is the federal government would put mandates across saying that we need a federal mask mandate, we need a set vaccination mandate, but states wouldn't want to abide by that.
I was gonna make me an omelet.
Don't forget to mute yourself. So what you would see is like a really big battle grab. You saw this especially in Texas. You guys remember when a lot of people were urging the governor to make a statewide mask mandate, or like a statewide shutdown. The governor made this one comment. He's saying he feels like he can leave it up to the individual to make the responsible choice for the community. And what you saw as a result of that was a lot of people, just because of the vast amount of like misinformation and just like pure contention, it just didn't work out. So eventually the state did have to make a statewide mask mandate. And then it was like a power grab between the state and the federal government, which you'll even see today in like COVID grants. A lot of COVID relief packages come from the national government, but with that, they are required to implement certain federal programs at the state level, which infringe on individual state sovereignty. So a lot of people just it was a mess. How do we handle? I don't know if you guys could hear that, but one of my chickens just freaked out and started clucking. And for some reason, I don't like to do Zoom at home. So Texas it was really complicated, mostly because it's a question of which authority has the power. Does the federal government have the power? Does the state government have the power to legislate this, emergency situation locally or nationally? That didn't have too much to do with the Interstate Commerce Clause, but it did take into consideration the necessary and proper clause when the federal government would make laws and regulations that would, because of the supremacy clause. Do you guys recall what the supremacy clause is for? I'll read it to you. Hold on just a second while I find it. Article 6. Article 6. this constitution and the law of the land, which shall be made under the prudence of thereof, and the treaties made, or of which shall be made under the United States, shall be supreme law of the land. And judges in every state shall be bound thereby, and anything in the constitution to the states contrary or notwithstanding. What does that mean? I'll give you a hint. It means that the federal law supersedes state laws. And if there's a state law that goes contrary to federal law, that state law is nullified. Quentin, what are you making in your kitchen? I'm so curious.
Oh, I'm making eggs.
Ah,
That's what I'm doing right now.
enjoy that.
I know, I'm hungry right now.
So let's look at a case. The federal law supersedes state law. So an example of that would be, let's talk about marijuana. Quentin, I'm recording this. I want to put that on TikTok. So Texas, let's talk about Colorado instead. Colorado has this law, as it's had for quite a while, that allows the use of THC products and various ways to be recreational use. You can go out and buy your ganja, your devil's lettuce, your kush grass. I don't know what else you kids are calling it. Gas. You could go buy that at a dispensary that sells it. They pay taxes, all good and happy. The federal government has a law to the contrary, right? Saying that marijuana products and certain elements of THC products and cannabinoid, you know what I'm talking about, are Schedule 1 narcotic medications that cannot be distributed, much like heroin or opioids. But we have several states now that do allow recreational use of marijuana products. Quentin, Justin wants to pull up. He wants to come through and get some eggs.
Sure, go ahead.
Listen, Quentin, I think at the beginning of the semester, somebody asked me about my thoughts about food in class, and I said, just bring enough for everyone.
Shit, I'm cooking right now. Might as well.
I have some chicken eggs. You definitely want to avoid me.
Oh. Nah, I think that'd be perfect. Yeah, give me some of your chicken eggs. I think it'd be great.
I don't actually like eggs. I don't eat them. I mean, they're fine. But when my chickens, I have 6 chickens now. I used to have 17 chickens that would lay eggs almost every day. So I would have like 4 or 5 cartons of eggs just sitting there for weeks. And we'd give them to our neighbors. So I'll put you on the list, Quentin.
Yeah, definitely do that. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
They're really good. So how is it that Colorado can have a law that allows okay, Dean, so I'll come back to that at the end. I don't want to confuse everyone quite right now. Colorado can sell Colorado, California, Washington marijuana products and have it be legal and be okay because the federal law supersedes the state law. And the answer is not as good as you would think, except that currently the policy for prosecuting violators of the Controlled Substance Act relating to marijuana is they're just not going to implement it. That's literally the answer. The federal government has come out and made blanket statements saying that while they are not changing the law, they are not enforcing that one area of the law. But in reality, if they choose to, the attorney general can very easily say that they are going to now prosecute marijuana crimes at the federal level and shut it all down, in theory. And I think for a moment, they might under near the end of the Trump administration, they have kind of came out and said that they were thinking about starting to reinforce it. But then we had a change of administration, and our current Attorney General is Merrick Garland, who has just straight up said no. In fact, they did come out on January 3rd and say that they are trying to reclassify or reschedule THC products. So at the federal level, which would essentially be legalizing it for prescription use for the nation. And so places like Texas wouldn't have a choice but to allow the sale of it. There's no reason that they can't. To answer your question, Dean, who wrote in the chat that you do see a lot of CBD products and a lot of THC products. The law specifies a very specific or type of THC products. I don't have all of the information, but essentially what you're seeing is, for lack of a better term, off-brand THC. Like they're kind of, it's like when you go to a place you might not know, but if you buy like a margarita and they don't have a liquor license, yeah, a small percentage. They don't have a liquor license, so they sell you like a wine cooler margarita. This is a similar thing. There's a science behind it, but I have no idea how to science. I don't have an idea how to do most things. Let me go through a little bit more here. So one thing that's a little bit of a fun fact trivia is that you'll see whenever there is both the state flag here and the federal flag, United States flag, the United States flag has to fly above or at the same level as the state. So that's interesting. All right. This is a cool little graph I found talking about specific powers delegated to the federal government. These are things that only the federal government can do. And then anything else is reserved powers to the state. Things that only a state can do. Maintain schools. One of them is election integrity and insurance, like health insurance. Creating public school systems, things like that are reserved specifically for the state. But you do see a lot of overlap, right? Most things in here, there are certain laws that exist both federally and statewide for, as it relates to criminal justice. We know that some states are able to tax, right? All states are able to, but some places incorporate it. You have state and federal banks. So there are certain areas that can be shared, but there's also specific areas that cannot be delegated to others. I already said that. We talked about those two. There's express powers, concurrent powers would be powers that are shared by both the federal and the state. And then there's reserved powers. There's also limits on what the states can do. They can't enter into treaties. They can't make their own money. They can't let a person jump from state to state. They would have to be extradited back to the state. So like if you're going to be a Ted Bundy and go from state to state just murdering, you're not going to be, what's the word? Not immune because you're now residing in a different state. Okay, so we did talk about the shifts and the Bill of Rights. Things here. I'm going to skip to a different PowerPoint now. Because I want to go through what I don't know what that means. The specific areas of federalism that would have existed throughout the United States. We already talked about all of this stuff. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so federalism has evolved a lot since we've grown as a nation for a number of reasons. One, we just are discovering new areas that might be requiring representation. Things just haven't happened before. There's no way that our founding fathers could have accounted for every single situation that's brought forth. Like the internet, that's a whole new phenomenon. Just the sheer size and like complexities of our national government make it difficult for them to have like an all out understanding of who has powers in all circumstances. So as you'll see, as time progresses and as societies change and the society's relationship with government, what they want from government changes, the power balance will shift between the federal and state governments. We started out with state-centered federalism. There's a couple of Supreme Court cases that exemplify this: McCulloch v. Maryland and Gibbons v. Ogden. Gibbons v. Ogden is a steamship case. There was a law in New Jersey that said if you do not hold a New Jersey steamship license, you will be required to pay an additional tax once you land in a New Jersey port on the products that you're importing. So there is also a federal steamship license. In this case, Gibbons sued, saying that he shouldn't be given, or he shouldn't be imposed a tax because he has the federal license instead of the state license. The state license is, again, what you would need to have in order to avoid being taxed. So, went to the Supreme Court. In this case, yes, they said that because of the supremacy clause, they cannot be punished by an additional tax for not having that state license, because the federal government supersedes that of the state. Same thing with McCulloch v. Maryland. That was about a bank. The state of Maryland was putting a tax on all non-state banks. So the federal bank in Maryland was being taxed a state tax for not being federally licensed or something like that. And the Supreme Court again said, you can't tax the federal government because we supersede the state government. That moves into a shift to dual federalism. Dual federalism is also kind of compared to a layer cake. Do you guys know what a layer cake looks like? Let me pull up a picture. Layer cake.
Wait, a what?
A layer cake.
Like a wedding one?
I'll show you a picture. Like a layer cake. A cake with layers.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, a layer cake, there's no mixing, right? There's very clear and defined areas for, imagine this being the federal and state power. They exist and there's a hierarchy. There's not a lot of mingling between the two, as compared with marble cake. Oops. Marble cake federalism is more like, oh, this is even better, more like a marble. Like, have you guys ever had marble pound cake? It's really good. So marble cake federalism, I don't want to watch this. I've gone too deep. Okay. Marble cake federalism is when the federal and state governments would cooperate or implement certain activities, and this was a result of the Great Depression. Layer cake federalism, which came right before that, was where programs and functions were very clearly defined among the state and actual governments. Let me see this picture too. Clear delineation of authority. So layer cake federalism is also called dual federalism. Marble cake federalism happens after the Civil War and comes as a result of the federal works programs during the Great Depression. And it shifts to marble federalism. It was necessary because the federal government had to step in to regulate certain economic programs in order to help pull the United States out of the Great Depression. So there was a lot of mixing of authority. You'd have things like, excuse me, works programs. The San Antonio Zoo is a works program. The federal government will give big blocks of money to a state or to a local entity and say, you know, give this to a private contractor to build something or to implement some sort of program or something that helps people get out of the economic depression, and implement it on your side. We'll fund it, you implement it, and that requires a lot of, like, you know, involvement with each other. And this, they could not avoid it because states were far too much in debt to be able to get themselves out of the depression. The federal government had to step in. The idea is that if the federal government provides these projects and programs to states, it'll require, you know, if you have to build a dam, you have to hire people, you have to pay the people. And in that way, you kind of jumpstart the economy, because now people who were previously unemployed are able to get employment, which means they have an income, they can pay their bills, and the bills will then help the companies. So you can see like the snowball effect there. Excuse me, goodness. But the problem with that, while it was successful in helping the United States get out of the Great Depression, it also gave way to LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, when he was president, implementing in the 60s the Great Society program. This was when the federal government expanded its power, and in terms of the economy, it was very negative. It didn't have a great effect. But in terms of like social rights and social justice programs, it was very positive. It was things like ending discrimination by federal mandate, requiring or nullifying any state legislation that would prevent people from voting. So socially, it was very successful, but in terms of the economy, it was not. They would start implementing what's called unfunded mandates during LBJ's Great Society. Unfunded mandates are similar to the works programs that you would have seen under cooperative federalism. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. COVID sucks. In cooperative federalism, they would provide the money to support the project or program. In Great Society, unfunded mandates would require the states to implement a program or some sort of thing, but they would not fund it. So essentially it was requiring the states to do something and fund it themselves. An example of this is the EPA. Everybody in here thinks that places that have hazardous waste as a byproduct of whatever, like energy companies, should get rid of their waste in a responsible way, right? Nobody wants to pollute the waters. This required that they do, but more often than not, it costs more money to hire a responsible, or, you know, to create a responsible way of getting rid of your waste than it would be to just simply dump it out the window, right? Littering's free, guys. Or is it? I mean,
Oh, what about the pollution rate over in Michigan? I forgot. I've seen the.
are you talking about Flint, Michigan, and how they still don't have clean water?
That's what I was talking about. I've seen the documentary of what, 2 years, like that documentary thing that was crazy.
Every now and then, I'll just like ruin family events by saying things like, you guys know that there's over, so, you know, like maybe 1,000 or something missing or murdered Indigenous women still, right? Or, you know, Flint, Michigan still doesn't have water. And usually that's when my dad's complaining about something. And I'm just like, well,
They still never fixed it yet.
I have not heard of any, honestly, we'll talk about it when we do social movements, but no. And there's a couple of reasons why. Mostly it's lost traction. And a lot of it has to do with money. and like who's profiting from these and how much, like what's the cost versus like output. Is it going to cost more to fix the problem for a small amount of people? Are those small amount of people going to outweigh the costs that are required or they're going to be incurred from the distribution? And some of it's just bureaucratic nonsense. And it's not just Flint. I mean, there are other areas like in Pennsylvania, there's 3 Mile Island where they don't have clean water. There's places that are just like unlivable now. Although one would say that if you don't have clean water, it's probably unlivable. But like 3 Mile Island is still contaminated with nuclear waste. Denton still can set their water on fire because of the fracking. So yeah, I mean it's not without its flaws, but it's the EPA would set like requirements for carbon emissions is a great example. It's like if you want to build a car, you have to now comply with a certain level of carbon emissions from that car. And it's going to cost more to have cleaner emissions than it is to not. And you're going to have to just kind of succumb to that. You're going to have to accept that your profit margins are going to be lower. Another example is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I like to give this little anecdote just because the Americans with Disabilities Act was a piece of legislation that happened back in like the 90s-ish that required buildings that are publicly accessible to have access for people with handicap. Like you have to have ramps, you have to have doors that fit certain, 36 inches, I think it is. There has to be braille on doors that are labeled. There has to be both a hearing and an auditory. Sorry, you have to be able to auditory and visual stimulation for fire alarms. Those are because of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Everybody thinks that Americans should be able to access public buildings regardless of their mobility, right? If you have a wheelchair or you're blind or deaf, you should still be able to access the resources you need that are readily accessible to anyone else. So that's what the legislation was about. But it basically said, we need everybody to be able to access these public buildings. So you need to implement these changes, but we're not going to fund those changes. So you're going to have to do it on your own. And that's very expensive to go back and retrofit, doorways to meet a certain standard. So our current governor, Greg Abbott, was in the legislature when that was being discussed. He actually voted against it. He voted against it, not because he's like a terrible person, but because it wasn't fair to require private businesses to pay their own money to have to implement these programs. Should they? Obviously, yes, but it shouldn't be a federal law. That's his argument. So he voted against the ADA. We do know the ADA passed. At the time, the Americans with Disabilities Act was being discussed, and whoa, is this what's making my y'all? For months, I was like, why is my camera so bad? I forgot to take the sticker off of it. You guys have no idea how long I have been complaining about that. Sophia, we just did something good. Okay. So Greg Abbott he is currently now in a wheelchair. We know that, right? You guys have seen Greg Abbott? Quentin, are you still laughing at me? Yeah. Well, I'm about to give you something more to laugh at, okay? So Greg Abbott is in a wheelchair. Now, he wasn't always in a wheelchair. Back when the ADA was being discussed, he was fully mobile, stood up on his own 2 feet. And then he voted against the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then he went for a jog. And then a tree fell on him and paralyzed him from the waist down. Good thing that the ADA passed. He also is the governor, and the governor has the best public housing in Texas. the governor's mansion, which would have had to have been retrofitted. Bring that baby closer. Oh my gosh, who are you? Tell me all about that, baby. I'll wait for him to come back. So, under the Great Society, well, like I said, there's a lot of social justice taking place, but they were very, very unpopular. Unfunded mandates are now unconstitutional. That prompts us to move into what's called new federalism. And that started under Nixon, when he is systematically giving rights that once belonged to states and then were assumed by the federal government back to the states. So devolution, a good example of this is the case Lopez, or United States v. Lopez. I love this case. It happens at Edison High School. Anybody went to Edison? I can see that Dean's about to type something. I'm so excited. Hey, now that you guys can see my my stuff, you should see my Elvis posters back here. Should give you guys a tour. Was that your daughter? No, it was just a random child you picked up.
Nah, that's my cousin.
Oh, see, that's even better because
Yeah.
I don't have to like deal with childhood stuff. These are my
I
posters.
know, I don't want one yet.
That's Elvis,
yeah.
that's Steve Ray Vaughan. Here's some of my books, my record collection. Man, I'm so happy that I can see I have great quality now. That's awesome. So Alfonso Lopez was a student. I had friends there and I played there for a few games when I was in high school. Well, this took place in Edison High School, 1995. Alfonso Lopez was a student, a senior. Alfonso, yes. He went to school with a gun. Come on, Fonzie.
Oh yeah, I remember that. He went to my middle school too. He he was supposed to go to Burbank, but then he went to Edison because he got caught with a gun and then some other like weed possessions. And I think he went to jail, or I don't know if it was Alfonso or another dude for dating a minor.
That was probably another student because this happened in 1995.
Really?
But
Because I
nowadays,
remember like 5 years ago there was like an Alfonso that went to jail because he carried like a weapon, or he was like having like relations with like a minor or something. I saw
oh
it on
my
the news.
God. That is so common because I knew teachers too who did that when I was in high school, but no. Yeah, this took place, and actually the reason that this happened is probably why the people who came after actually had to go to jail. So, back in the day, there was a federal law that said that people cannot carry firearms on campuses. It was the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990. And so Alfonso Lopez went to school with a gun. He wasn't being nefarious. He didn't have any like malicious intentions. I think he was just trying to intimidate somebody. And obviously he was arrested. He was charged with a state crime. And then those charges were dropped and the federal government picked up the charges for violating the Gun-Free School Zone Act. So can anybody see the problem with that? Why is there a problem with the federal Gun-Free School Zone Act? Think about our expressed powers of government. Think about the powers that are reserved to the state. So the federal government is not allowed to make laws or regarding education. Education is a state right. That's why you'll see cases like San Antonio v. Rodriguez. That case was sent to the U.S. Supreme Court regarding school funding in Texas, and the Supreme Court. Go ahead, Jacob. Thank you. This is going to be recorded. Well, it is recorded, so I'll post it. San Antonio. No, I know. Don't worry. I'm still looking in like 1 minute. In this case, it is unconstitutionally violation of the rights of Congress to make laws regarding whether or not schools can carry firearms on campus. So Alfonso Lopez said that the law under which he was arrested was unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court agreed and gave that right back to the state. Now, the state of Texas, it did go back to not allowing guns on schools, but subsequently have made it legal to carry firearms on campus. That's actually much farther than I thought we were gonna get in class today. So I'm gonna go ahead and upload this for people who weren't able to show up. Thank you guys so much. I know it's so weird. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to come back. It's probably gonna be like this on Thursday too, just because I guess we have to wait for myself and my son to test negative. Sorry, I don't want to get you guys sick. So keep an eye on your email, and I'll see you either probably on Zoom on Thursday and then maybe back next week, hopefully. Cool. All right, thanks guys. Thank you for being cool. Let me stop sharing my screen so that I can say bye to y'all. Bye. Let me know if you guys have questions or anything. Again, I will post this, so you'll be good. Stay healthy. Wash your hands. Don't drink and drive. Bye, Clark. Chick-fil-A on campus.